If you want to talk about Trump's trade policy or
Who
his
are you
immigration
with
policy,
exactly?
I'm with Huntington News.
Okay.
Yeah, so
We
maybe
can
we
do
can
it for
sit
about
down.
1 minute, and then we have to go do
Oh,
radio.
Let me step outside of this
Okay,
table.
well let's.
This way. 1 minute, and then we gotta walk down.
Okay, we're here with Congressman King, and he is willing to discuss his views on Trump's trade policy, or his immigration policy, or any other aspect that you'd like to
Pretty
consider.
much. I'm prepared to do that. And which one would you like to hear about?
Well, since our audience hasn't heard too much about his trade policy, and in my opinion, it's a disaster for American business and for free trade and around the world and leads to a trade war, maybe you could opine on that subject.
Well, I've listened to a good number of the remarks that were made by Donald Trump on this. I don't know that there's a written policy that's on his website or anything, but I know that he has talked about how the Chinese are manipulating their currency, and he said that he would slap a tariff on the Chinese to match up to the equivalent to the amount that their advantage was because of their currency value manipulation. And he said at the time that if he did so, that would be a 45% duty on products coming from China. Whether he would want to do that right away from the beginning, but he used that number then, so we have to wonder what that would be in action. And so if you end up with a 45% duty on products coming from China, that would shut out a lot of product coming from China, most of the product coming from China. And by the same token, then I know what the Chinese would do. They would slap a tariff, equivalent tariff, on products from going from the United States to China. That would shut down trade that would be a trade war. That would shut down trade between China and the United States. I don't favor that tactic. I don't think that's useful. And then, with regard to putting a tariff on products coming from Mexico to pay for a wall, that also starts a trade war. We have a NAFTA trade agreement, and that agreement was signed by Bill Clinton back in the 90s. And so I think that we are bound by the treaties that we have and by the trade agreements that we have. And when you start throwing out these kind of threats, it throws all kinds of imbalance into it. And if the United States of America is willing to, and even discussing the idea, if a president of the United States discusses the idea of raising tariffs in this fashion, that begins trade wars that we know will come, and we saw that take place, and we saw
the 30s, right?
Well, the Smoot-Hawley, and
Smoot-Hawley, right.
that threw us into the
whole
depression
world
of the
went
30s.
into depression.
We can't have that. We've moved a long ways towards trade. Now, I don't think we should just blindly be opening up our markets to other countries that want to sell to us, but I think that wherever that they have access to our markets, we by golly better have access to theirs on equal footing.
But when we put a tariff on their goods, it makes all their goods more expensive also for the people that are buying their goods here in America, right?
Well, yes, and that advantages the American producers. There's trade protectionism that is there, but I'm about the adjustments that we need to make incrementally, because if you allow competition and our comparative advantage that we have to flourish, then the markets will adjust those prices incrementally, and you won't see dramatic shifts in our economy. And it'll force us to get competitive where we need to be competitive. And as Adam Smith wrote about this when he talked about wool from England and wine from Portugal.
Elaborate a little bit more about that concept, comparative advantage, because I think that's the key concept that many people don't understand. Why, and it explains why trade between nations and trades between states is good.
Well, I saw you nod your head when I said comparative advantage. I don't hear that word about hardly anybody that I'm doing politics or business with these days. But Adam Smith wrote about it this way: we have a lot of sheep in England, and I think he had said Scotland as well.
Uh-huh.
And we shear those sheep, turn that into wool. We can do that better than folks in Portugal. But down there they have vineyards, and we like wine, so they can make the wine better and cheaper and ship it to us in exchange for the wool that we can make better and cheaper and ship it to them. So the comparative advantage in England and in Scotland was sheep and wool and mutton and the products that come from sheep. The comparative advantage for Portugal was the wine, and so why wouldn't you trade with people that were more efficient at what they do? It increases the wealth and the capital from each party, and increases the standard of living of both sides.
The consequence is that everybody has more wool and everybody has more wine, right? So
that's true.
So that means everybody is richer and wealthier because they have more of what they want.
And on a warm day, I'll go with a little more wine and a little less wool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the interview, Congressman.
Pleasure. You bet.